we ended up having to convert a milking parlour into our now unit, and like again,
milking parlour.
Yeah, so like
cows get milked.
Where cows get milked. Yeah, I mean, it was just sort of. I didn't know anything about manufacturing or like how to build a production line or anything. It was just sort of this like relentless belief that I needed to put Botivo in a bottle and start selling it.
You know, no one can buy houses, like COVID's going on, the economy is going to shit, like everything feels really heavy and really overwhelming. Oh, then also, by the way, moderate and don't drink. And so the cultural tension was actually, well, for real feels really heavy, so we're going to play a role in culture which is really delightful and pleasurable and light. I think people don't understand how different that makes the taste experience. So I always wang on about that kind of metaphor of, you know, you buy chicken stock in the supermarket and it's delicious and it's fine, but if you make it overnight with herbs in it and it sits in your slow cooker, like that taste experience of that chicken stock is going to be a completely different taste experience. And that's the way that I think about Botivo when I try to explain it to people is, you know, Sam tried it with flavourings, but that's the chicken stock in the supermarket. We're the homemade stuff.
Sam, Imme, thank you so much for doing this. Massive fan of what you're building at Botivo. As I said, I was at that Lura restaurant the other week. It cost me a fucking fortune, but the only kind of singing grace from that was the drink Botivo. And it's just amazing when you kind of have it in that restaurant setting, as we were saying earlier, like in those credential, influential places where they pour it perfectly with the orange. It's just... It's so delicious. And then I obviously just love the brand, love the colour, which is, I think we'll probably start with the colour. It's just such a unique colour. As we were saying, it's not a in-your-face yellow. It's got like richness and depth and texture to it. And also just love all the activations you're doing. I think the yellow piano is a slice of genius. I think it's very Purple Cow-esque. So thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having
us.
What I want to start with is the colour, and I think the juxtaposition of artisanal hedonism is that kind of whet my curiosity straight off the bat. And
it always lures people in.
Yeah. The word hedonism is just such a great word, and I think it's a good part of life. It makes life interesting. But why that colour? Why does that colour and that depth of colour represent hedonism? In Botivo, and why did you go with that colour? Because you could have gone with a whole myriad of different colours.
There was a few historical reasons, and then also when we would develop the brand. So I don't know how much you know about sort of where the brand started.
Right,
now.
Of course.
So where the brand started and where it is now. So there was actually a bottle that existed before I came on as Sam's business partner and rebranded it. And the yellow wax was actually always part of the original bottle. And then we sort of redid the whole brand and then sort of realised that, spoke to those consumers, realised that the yellow was like what people remembered. It stood out on the shelf in trade. It was, what people really attached themselves to. And we decided to kind of take that even further and make the label yellow and then make the world yellow and then trademark the yellow hour as our consumption moment and then sort of took it to the next level because with a kind of marketing hat on, the key thing for me is stickability. And I think like colour is such an interesting shortcut to stickability and being memorable as a brand. So we wanted to just dominate that at every single touch point from a brand point of view.
Yeah, I mean, people sort of often randomly, they wouldn't actually remember the actual name. Be like, like that product with like the yellow wax, and it was just, as you say, so sticky and seemed mad to get rid of it. I mean, the original reason why we used it was because our there was no other products around that had yellow, but also like the honey that we used to begin with was this amazing yellow colour, and I mean it was a nightmare because it was it came set and you had to pick up a sort of. It came like sort of 50-kilo buckets there in the sort of room.
It was solid.
It was solid set honey, and I'd have to sort of sit there just sweating, scraping honey out the barrel, trying to sort of get it into our tanks.
And that yellow hour thing is interesting because I think that's another thing I picked up, owning that specific occasion. What is that yellow hour like in terms of, and how does that link to hedonism? Do you know what I mean? That kind of that moment you're trying to occupy. Because I think a brand. A lot of people said to me brands back to the stickability piece, and I think the owning a colour is your shortcut to stickability fucking love that. And I think the obvious example of this is Perfect 10 with that green.
Yeah.
Just like hammer it home so you know exactly what it is. But I think in terms of the yellow hour I think brands are trying to occupy like a 1% of someone's brain. Yeah. And like the faster you can get to that 1%, whether it's like a literal time or a color or a word like hedonism, the stickier it gets. But how did you, what is that yellow hour like, or how does that hour kind of bubble up into the big thesis of the brand? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that sort of, it doesn't all start with the yellow hour. The yellow hour comes from a few things. Like, I've worked in sort of brands building for, almost 20 years. And I think the one thing that everyone needs when it comes to drinks is like a really clear consumption moment, right? Like what's the occasion when you're going to drink something? And particularly in the non-alcoholic space, I think the biggest challenge is people don't know, when it's for or what to create around it, or, like people, they just sort of think, it's an alcohol moment, which then becomes an alcoholic moment. And that's not what we wanted to create. We wanted to own a moment, a feeling, a vibe. And the yellow hour came from, a play on the golden hour.
Golden hour.
The golden hour being, that moment, when the light's beautiful and everyone's taking photos and you're having drinks with your pals in the pub and everyone's like, oh my God, it's a golden hour.
Yeah.
And everyone knows what that feels like. It feels like a really exciting time of day. It feels like you're winding down, you're moving into the next stage, you're with your pals, everyone feels great. It's a very emotional space for me. And the yellow hour came from that, which was we wanted to own yellow, we wanted to own an occasion. It's an aperitivo, and an aperitivo is, between 5 and 7. It's that moment when, you slip out of work and you want something really special to demarcate, the next stage in your day. And the yellow hour is what that's about. So it's about really owning an occasion that linked to our brand.
Yeah, because I was speaking to Margot Henderson, who does Rochelle Canteen. Owns Rochelle Canteen. And she was saying that we were talking about like the art of drinking a Negroni, and it's like what you want is that smack of is such a smack when you first start drinking, that it does kind of demarcate a moment in time where you're like moving to a different part of the day. But then she was saying if you drink it slowly enough, the ice at the end, so you need that hit when you're stressed, like bang, right, it's time to chill. But the ice, as it melts, then you kind of the drink kind of dances with you in terms of your mood. The drink's so powerful at the beginning, but by the time it's kind of watered down with the ice, you're kind of looser and goosey,
you're going on a
goosey as
journey.
well. And I think yours does it because it's got that, I don't know, this apple cider vinegar kind of hit, but it's the bittersweet backbone is what you talk about. Like it's just that it has that kind of smack around the face, and then it just, but obviously you're not getting twisted on it because it's alcohol free, but it has that kind of moment, which is, as I say, I think it moves into a different part of the day. In terms of like, to take us to 3 a.m. Mexico City. Like, take us to that. Whoever wants to lead that.
Well, we can talk about how Botivo came about. I think, like, for me, what's really interesting about it is that most non-alcoholic drinks brands started because someone, I don't know, they couldn't drink, or they were pregnant, or they were sober, and so they decided they wanted to create a drinks brand. And that, for me, is a very different starting point. I think Botivo started a completely different way. It started very organically, which Sam can talk about.
We were,
sorry, mate. Yeah.
No, like Botivo sort of came about. It was actually made for the clients of like another business I have called Rum Runner, which is like a drinks consultancy and event company. And we sort of did like fancy parties for sort of fancy people, and like when our sort of clients were asking for sort of like more sophisticated, like non-alcoholic options, I sort of, as a sort of lover for sort of craft and like making drinks, like a Rum Runner, like our thing was always to sort of start with raw ingredients. It was never to sort of buy in purees or liqueurs. We make everything ourselves, which basically meant that like when I sort of started asking for non-alcoholic products, I wanted to have a go at making my own one. And I like looked at the market to sort of see what was out there, and realised that like one of the main things that was missing from the non-alcoholic category was that sort of craft or maker culture. Like if you look at any sort of adjacent category, you have like brewers and beer, and you have winemakers in wine, and like distillers and distillers. But in the non-alcoholic space, there was very little of that, and that was like a big part of the sort of brief I gave myself for Botivo.
And what were these? Some of these lavish parties you were doing? like take us to one of
Go
those?
on, tell him. He's so low key. He never shows up about it. We did the royal wedding.
Yeah, I need to hear about this. That sounds interesting.
We did like. I mean, Brahman has done some like extraordinary.
Because that is the hedonism part of it, and I think there's the some of the greatest ideas start in these, like at these lavish parties, and doesn't like not specifically your lavish parties, but one of these things is it's like all these. If you actually kind of look at this as they're microcosms of cities, like the reason London's so creative is there's so many fucking interesting people there colliding. Whereas if you go to say, I keep lambasting Hull, but like Hull hasn't exactly got the same as London, right? So these parties are where all these interesting ideas intersect. So yeah, what was kind of the lavish parties? Maybe take us to one, and what was kind of the receptive feedback you were getting? Because I think, as you say, no one was taking craft to the low to no or alcohol free category, but then something obviously happened at this in the zeitgeist. What made you think, right, let's actually keep moving with this?
Well, I mean,
Tell me about some of the parties you did though.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah, let's get to the good stuff.
Yeah, tell me about the hedonism.
He did the royal wedding.
The royal wedding.
Yeah.
Fucking banging. Which one did you do? Which one?
Harry and Meghan's, yeah. But we also picked for that one.
Calvin Harris's wedding.
Yeah, we did Calvin Harris's.
Well, what was the wedding like?
Harry and Meghan's?
Yeah, what was she like?
I mean, she's lovely. Yeah, I mean...
You should write for OK Magazine.
He won't tell me anything. I'm always trying to get the inside
scoop.
Get the goss down.
Like, tensions were high at that sort of cocktail tasting. Also, like, please like the drinks.
Yeah.
And, but we did Eddie Goulding's with Calvin Harris, we've done stuff for Kate Moss. Got flown out to Qatar to make sort of cocktails for 3 hours for the royal family out there. Like, we were doing sort of like, big fancy parties where people really cared about like the quality of drinking.
Yeah, because I think you learn at the cross section of everything. Like I interviewed the founder of Innocent the other week, Adam Ballon, and he's got a racing car addiction. He loves racing cars around tracks. And I was like, what does racing cars teach you about brand building? Like, he was like, I've never thought of that. And he goes, well, actually, it's the delicate dance between like high octane energy, as in you're razzling a car around Brands Hatch. So it's that like kind of restless, like grinding down, but actually a lot of race car driving is data, and if you go into a car without looking at the data, you're just going to go off the grid. So he's like, that's what brand building is like, is it's a dance between high octane energy with like kind of the delicate, soft organizational touch of data. And I think at these parties, which are like probably lavish, what were some of the learnings you took from that you think have kind of oozed into the brand, like the honey, I suppose?
Well, I mean, like you've got to be ready. Like whatever happens, 500 people are piling to the door in 2 hours. Like, be ready. I mean, in terms of like a sort of like legit, they're like a logistical nightmare. We have like multiple vans, up to sort of 20 people. Yeah, probably like a tick list of 1,000 things, and we're going like it's just sort of like.
But I think also the brief for the product that you created came from the demands of people in that space, right? They were sort of quite opulent, and they wanted something that was non-alcoholic but had no flavorings, no preservatives, full taste, all natural, like really craft, like made from scratch. And I think that's when you realise it didn't exist. And that's when you created it.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess like the first sort of challenge we had was like how to overcome like a key thing for me, like three key things. One, I wanted to bring some craft into the category. Another one was like I wanted it to sort of not rely on like preservatives to sort of stabilize it. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to use like real ingredients, and I guess like the toughest one to begin with was like how to overcome the sort of shelf life, because like everything natural wants to sort of go off, and so just sort of bought every book I could under the sun on like preservation, and sort of just read everything I could, and I sort of came across these like ancient tonics called oxymels. Oxymels.
Mel's, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like Latin for acid and honey. So the acid being vinegar and honey, and then plus botanicals, and like these were sort of drunk by like the ancient Greeks as a way to like preserve the medicinal properties of like botanicals. So yeah, they were always sort of available. And that was like the perfect base, and real like light bulb moment to sort of realise that actually we could do this. What I didn't have was any data around like how long they'd last for, because they hadn't been done before on a sort of like large scale. So then sort of started playing around with various botanicals, but I mean, vinegar was like an amazing, it is like an amazing ingredient. It is like, it's been like using preservation forever, and it also sort of comes from alcohol. all vinegar starts its life off as alcohol first, so it has all this like amazing like extraction qualities that like you get from alcohol. And I mean, I guess like the main challenge I see in the non-alcoholic category is that alcohol is incredible. Like it brings body, like mouthfeel. It has extraction qualities. It is like the ultimate preservative, and without that, it's impossible. It really is impossible. So like you have to find like a robust base or use preservatives.
And I think like just going back to your question around kind of hedonism and where that comes in, I think for me, what makes the Botivo story different was that where it was born from was a sort of world of hedonism, which are these sort of opulent parties, and people wanted to have something like delicious and powerful, and that's where it was born. And I think the kind of issue from it with my brand hat on with the non-alcoholic category is that it's all about moderation, right? And actually, we're not a moderation brand; we're a pleasure brand, and we always bang on about that, like internally, right? And hedonism is a really big part of that. We don't believe that hedonism just means staying up till 8 a.m. and smashing loads of drugs. Actually, hedonism can be going to having a delicious carrot in like a restaurant, and it's really crispy and like it smells amazing, and it's that really indulgent sort of hedonistic moment around experiences.
And I think reading a book like in a park with a coffee is hedonistic. I think the definition of hedonism is like so tied to just getting off your nut. Like I don't think it's that. I think you're right. It's those small moments, which is kind of what I kind of put my hat on is this yellow hour, right, or the golden hour, or whatever it was.
It's definitely very indulgent.
It's that kind of that indulgent moment. I want to go just back to these sort of lavish parties because I think this is where my curiosity is going. But like because I think. I think perfection is like 1,000 things done very well, and I think you guys are doing loads of things that are kind of all incrementally adding up. But at these, because I'm reading the book by the founder of Four Seasons, fucking interesting, and he basically goes into how they differentiated the hotel. So it's a Canadian guy, and he was like, well, we can't be the most opulent hotel, we can't be to begin with, right? Obviously now it is. So he goes, what we're going to do is just do the service, like unparalleled service. Like think of every small thing that when it adds up, it creates this kind of lavish experience. And if these kind of lavish parties were the kind of the birthplace of the brand, were there any like interesting things or like things that's kind of sparked your curiosity of like, oh shit, that's how they do that? Do you know what I mean? In terms of when you're at these parties.
In terms of what though? In terms of
like is like the little things that add up. Do you know what I mean? Like at the wedding, what was there like? Did they do something special for the guests? How did you pour the drinks?
All about like detail though, isn't it? I mean, and I think like in terms of like our drinks themselves, like people often ask us to make like simple drinks like margaritas and Negronis. When we make them, we make them amazing. But people generally book us to make like something different. And like especially in the events world, I guess. It's very difficult to have a brand presence because it might be someone's wedding or a corporate party. Like you can't plaster your brand everywhere. So like the way that we would stand out would be by making an interesting drink that people would sort of taste and stop and talk about because there was sort of an ingredient there that like they weren't expecting. And I think like learnings from that was, with Botivo is also a very unusual flavour.
Yes, so unusual.
And people talk about it because of its sort of strange ingredients
like the story, like the reason why it became a thing was because Sam created it for these parties, and then people kept coming up and being like, "Where do I buy this fucking delicious drink?" And that's when you bottled it, right? And that's in the old brand, and it was a sort of a cottage industry. But that's
when you say cottage industry,
it was more like a sort of side hustle. Like I knew that I wanted to spend all my time on Botivo, but I had like another business to run, and I was actively looking for a business partner and. Eventually did in Mexico.
So let's go to 3 a.m. at a wedding, Mexico City. What's the first thing you say to each other?
I think it definitely was not Botivo. I think like we were sort of chatting.
Imme just comes on out like fucking Botivo. Hi me. No,
so the backstory is that Botivo had been around for a couple of months, but it was in like a wine bottle. It was quite a serious. A beautiful brand, and I tried at a friend's house as a consumer. So my entry point into Botivo was actually as a consumer. And going back to the whole hedonist thing and where that came from, a lot of that came from the brand strategy and us being like, Sam's the artisan and I'm quite a hedonist actually, just in general in life. And I love brands that have this tension between attention. And I think
the juxtaposition of
exactly. So I thought what I found so interesting was that when I tried this liquid for the first time in the old branding, I was obsessed with it. I was drinking it every day. Like I'm a boozer. Like I would never normally interact with an alcoholic category at that point. And I just couldn't believe that me as someone who was quite sort of pleasure seeking, like could just love it so much. But the brand at the time or the bottle it was in, because it was, sort of side hustle, was a sort of serious bottle and it was in a wine bottle. And anyway, so when I met Sam at 3 a.m. in Mexico, and I asked him sort of what he did, and he was with his wife, who was also at the time working on it with Sam. And
whose wedding was it? Like, how did you both?
It was a mutual friend from. I used to live in New York, and you were
like at school, like an old.
Okay, yeah. So it's like you guys didn't know each other.
No.
Okay, you're right. Okay, yeah.
So anyway, so then I was like, "What do you do?" And Sam was like, "Botivo," and I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "I've been looking for you. Like, I'm obsessed with this liquid, but my background is brand building, and I think it's a really pleasurable, playful, rich liquid, and I want to come on board as your business partner, and I really believe in it, and I think this could be like the next big thing, please." And I went home and I wrote a huge proposal of where I wanted to take it, and sort of begged Sam to bring me on.
We'll get into that proposal in a sec. I think it's so interesting how you, as you said, you came into it trying the product first.
Yeah.
I was speaking to Mark about this morning at breakfast, and he was basically saying that we were talking about why trends, everyone like talks about what's the next trend. Well, actually, I think the better question to ask is what's timeless. And in food and drink, it's like 1 minute's gut health, 1 minute's functional, 1 minute's low to no, 1 minute's blah 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 blah. Like there's the trends change. So like you want to build a brand that's timeless, and what is the thing that's going to stand the test of all time? Does the product taste unreal? Is it yummy? It's like really simple.
Yeah.
It's like, is it yummy? Like fucking hell. And I think it's so interesting and what Mark was saying is I'd pick a brand, the brand you can sort. Like the brand's actually the easy bit.
Yeah.
Because so many people get the brand right, but the product wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas actually if you invert it and say the product's unreal, you can get an agency. You can raise money and get an agency.
You do, but also the brand has to be connected to the liquid, and I think that's,
for sure. But I think
what
I think we're touching on here is like a real principle, which is the product. But as you said, it's the inside-outside job of like the brand works so well, but because when I drink it, it's like it's almost those illustrations are like kind of dancing on my taste buds. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's kind of the idea.
But it has to kind of work that way round. But so you meet at this wedding, and Imme, you're like, right, I'm gonna go and write this plan. Done brand building shit for ages. You've got this amazing product, Sam. Lavish parties, the full shebang. What's the opening sentence in that proposal? Like how do you structure it? Because I think that could really help. I think it's so easy to actually kind of conceive something in your head, but actually when you have to write it down and say this is how we're going to bring this Botivo baby into the world, it becomes interesting.
I think there's a few things. First of all, it was like, I am the last person to enter this category, or that was likely to enter it, and I'm obsessed with your liquids. So I'm like, I need to be part of this. I think this liquid and the taste is something really special. I need to be part of it. And then from a sort of brand point of view, for me, what makes Botivo really, really different is that it's a really pleasurable, really rich, really hedonistic liquid, right? And I think the brand at the time was quite serious and worthy, as was actually most things at the time in the non-alcoholic.
What year is this? This is
like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
But even then, things were either like really craft and serious and kind of health, or they were really flavored, fun, and kind of cheap, right? Soft drinks versus health drinks versus kind of mimic drinks of things that existed out there. And where the massive white space was from a category point of view was something that's super, super craft. And I mean handmade, takes a year to make. No flavorings, no preservatives, not craft because you put it on the bottle, but truly takes a year to make. And then something that was really playful and pleasurable, and brought this kind of joie de vivre kind of approach to life to it.
What's that word?
Joie de vivre, like just like grabbing life by the horns and like almost like our kind of banquet scene sort of has on the label and the whole world. And I just felt
is that label linked to the lavish parties? That kind of that.
I mean,
it could be.
I mean, it's interesting. So I think it's interesting that you picked up on like hedonism being at the crux of it, because actually that was something we constructed when we built the brand. But you're absolutely right in that it's in the DNA of it, because it was made for lavish, opulent places and for lavish.
Yeah, because that's what I'm trying to get to understand, is because it's so unusual how you can't reverse engineer something that unusual. So almost like it's like, but now it makes sense. If it is at these weird, unusual, lavish, it's unusual and lavish are the two words I'd pick up hedonistic as I drink it. Okay, that makes sense if it starts at this. You get a brief for like kind of a weird brief. It's not a brief you're going to get from a Diageo or a R&D department with £1 million quid. That's how you get a product that's genuinely unique.
Exactly,
yeah, that makes sense.
And that's kind of what I meant at the beginning when I said, for me, it's a really unique, an authentic story of how it began, because it wasn't, oh, I can't drink. I need to make a drink to fit this hole or whatever, And it wasn't Diageo saying, we need NPD. It was literally, I make a delicious drink for these people. Everyone loves it. I need to bottle it. And I think that, and then people just love it because it's so delicious, and that kind of evolved into something. And so for me, it feels like a really authentic story, which I really believe in, and which is very very easy for our team to talk about because they all kind of feel it. It's not it's not an opportunity everyone's trying to exploit. It's just everyone bloody loves it, and wants everyone to drink it and really feels passionate about it.
And then so on that doc, or that kind of, Alex Smith, the strategy guy, he's been on the podcast loads. He talks about like a strategy is you can hide behind PowerPoint slides and they're basically superfluous gumph that you present to people. But it's actually, if you write a strategy document as in type it out, like in almost like in a prose way, it cuts out all the whiff in your thinking. That's the right way of saying it. Probably shouldn't say that at Diageo, but you know what I mean? Is it, so what were you writing down, Imme, in terms of like, this is how we take this lavish, opulent, hedonistic bevy to Botivo?
I mean, there's kind of 4 areas to it that I always would tell a story around a brand about. And there's 4, I guess, tensions that you need to play to when you want to create a brand that has longevity and that is really resonant. And the first one is, what's the cultural tension that it's playing to? What is going on and why do you have longevity in terms of where culture is heading? The second thing is, what's going on in the category and what kind of white spaces or what tensions can you rub up against?
Yeah.
The third one is, who's your consumer? What makes them different? And the fourth one is, what makes your brand and your product, what's in its DNA? What can you do that no one else can do? And I sort of took those 4 elements, and for Botivo, what that was in culture, it was...
So the tension, just to find the tension specifically. So that's
so I'll talk you through it. So basically, for example, in culture, the tension was life is fucking shit, basically.
Yeah.
At the moment, no one can buy houses, COVID's going on, the economy is going to shit, everything feels really heavy and really overwhelming. Mm-hmm. And yet then what drinks in the category want people to then do is, then also, by the way, moderate and don't drink. So life's rubbish anyway, and I'm now going to come to you and I'm going to say, also, you can't drink anymore and you can't do this. And this is, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. And so the cultural tension was actually, for real feels really heavy. So we're going to play a role in culture, which is really delightful and pleasurable and light. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of, that fed into it.
Yeah.
And the tension in terms of the category was, at the time, and I think even now, to be honest.
So with the category, so you're looking at the alcohol. Were you looking at?
I'm looking at anything which doesn't have alcohol in it. So I'm looking at soft drinks, I'm looking at health drinks, I'm looking at non-alcoholic.
Not just kind of the aperitivo vibe.
No.
You weren't looking at seed lip and fill in the blank.
That as well.
But you're looking at the full
spectrum, and you're going, what is the what's the tension here? And actually, when it came to non-alcoholic, the tension was, it's all about moderation. It's all about what you can't do. And actually, the tension that how we wanted to rub up against that was, we're not about moderation. We're about the opposite. We're about hedonism and pleasure. So that was kind of what fed into that. So
tension 1 is culture. We're going to
So tension 1 is, we're going to bring delight to people when things are really rubbish. Tension number 2 is, we're going to bring pleasure to a category that's all about holding back and moderation. And then the consumer one was, actually, we're not going to talk to people that are, let's say, really health conscious or are doing stuff to cut back on calories. It was actually about kind of hedonistic pleasure seekers who love food and drink, who love how things are made, who love the quality of ingredients, like foodies, effectively.
Yep.
And actually at the time, and even now, I think a lot of the narratives around the non-alcoholic space are sober curious or holding back or health. And actually, we don't ever talk about health, even though we're really healthy, because our strategy is to go really big on pleasure and deliciousness and foodies, and we're promising them taste and an experience, not a moderation thing. And then the fourth one, which was, it's less of a tension actually, but is the brand one, is more, what can you do authentically to tell that story which no one else can? And we are the only brand that has no flavorings or preservatives in our category, in the kind of spirits category. We were the only one that took a year to make. We're the only one that had a maker at the heart of it, in spirits, not in, wine alternatives, etc. So the reason why we could claim, this idea of sort of being artisanal, but also being quite hedonistic, was because it was an artisanal process. But the liquid itself was so punchy and so powerful and strong and not watered down, and it could sort of talk the talk that we were kind of promising people. So that was the kind of whole strategy behind it.
Yeah, that tension thing's really interesting. That Alex Smith has the whole thing of unique selling points are kind of not like so many people talk about features, not benefits, when they're kind of we're less more probiotic, less calories, more protein. It's kind of just stuff that's very conscious, and it's like, oh, every fucker out there is saying the same thing. Do you know what I mean? And actually what he said, and that's almost like kind of conscious. Unique selling points are kind of conscious, but actually going deeper is unique points of disagreement, and that's where you can hit people subconsciously. It's like, how do you, and I suppose, Imme, your thing of saying this is that those tensions, it's like, what do you push against? What do you disagree with someone on? Because that's how you find, as you say, that kind of white space in the category. Yeah. And I think it's really interesting what you're saying. Yeah, because as like consuming the brand, looking at the brand, the activations, it's the antithesis to that kind of moderation, kind of watered down, not enjoyable, delicious, indulgent experience. And that's super interesting. Where did you learn those 4 kind of tenets?
I worked in sort of brand building for, on the agency side for like years. And actually that was like an iteration of that was what we were sort of taught in terms of like where to do brand positionings, basically. It was always like, look at those 4 areas.
What were some of the brands you did?
I worked for like Adidas, like Nike, and Diageo, Heineken, Grey Goose, like just a whole range.
So would Adidas create like a like how the Adidas would have that kind of thinking with the product?
Yeah, so it would be like I'd work on like brand architecture stuff, for example, where it'd be like, what is the Adidas master brand, and then what are the sub brands, and how do they all live together as a family, and how do we sort of identify and really clarify their different personalities and how they all sit together as
sick. Is that there's no example of that?
I mean, it changes literally every like 2 years. That's the thing. When I did that, I was consultant. I was in the agency for 7 years, then I was consultant directly for brands for like 8 years. And I'd say that I probably worked on the same brands like 3 or 4 times, and every time it would evolve.
Interesting. Yeah, because that's another thing we were talking about with Mark this morning, is this evolution piece of brands. It's like how you have to evolve. I talk about this. Well, I've been writing about this, like the champagne versus cocoa pop problem. So the champagne is like kind of when you've got your early adopters, and it's kind of so many founders of middle class create middle class products for middle class people, middle class branding, middle class price points. That's great. But if you want to come to the cocoa pop shopper, which isn't an Aldi shopper, it's someone who probably shops in Sainsbury's, and is cognizant of the price of Cocoa Pops, right? So how do you go from champagne? This is niche, this is mass market. And I think, as you said at the beginning with these lavish parties, it was quite old cottage, I think you said, brand. And now you've kind of ballooned it into this Botivo, and it's like we're not trying to suppress people from having fun. And I think that's how you move from champagne to Cocoa Pop. In terms of Sam, so then you get this document from Imme.
Yeah.
Like what's your perspective on it? Because what I want to eventually get to today is, I think what's really interesting with you guys is it's a male-female co-founder partnership, which is kind of unique in of itself. And I think I'm reading this book called The 7 Plots, fucking long, basically how to tell stories, really fucking interesting. And there's a bit in it where he talks about the perfect balance, which is between kind of the hero and the heroine, and not heroine like getting on smack, but like that is heroine's the right word, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think so. No,
Heroine.
Now you're making me doubt myself.
Yeah. But I want to explore some of these things further down the line, because it's a really interesting play, and I think it's unique because most people I sit across haven't got this kind of unique balance and relationship. But yeah, so you receive, to start open that up, you receive this document. Like, what are your initial guttural thoughts?
Well, I mean, I was very open to having a business partner anyway. Like, I think having like run my own business on like without a business partner before, it's a massive undertaking.
Sure. And
then to have 2 was even bigger. And Botivo, in terms of its complexity, was like, if it went well, would be like a massive beast that I would definitely need like some support with. So I was actively looking for a business partner, and then when I received Imme's document, I was like blown away. I was like, wow, this is incredible. And like, you know, marketing, brands, not my background, and you know, I'm perfectly capable of like, you know, running a business, but in terms of like getting it out there and selling it, like that's a massive, that was like a massive sort of problem for me, that Imme and her little document, or her long document, absolutely sold.
Yeah, I think going back to your point around like the partnership, I think it's obviously like male, female, but I think there's also like different energies. Like Sam is more of an introvert. You're also like, he pays much more attention to like detail, which is going back to your kind of point in the beginning about, you know, every detail about the way that Botivo is made comes from Sam, right? He's got like an obsession with detail and excellence. Well, I'm a bit more sort of extroverted, and a bit more like, this will be a great thing to do, you know. And I think having that balance is probably less about gender and more just about personality type. Do you agree?
Yeah, when I say gender, I don't mean it in terms of like, this is purely from like the storytelling book. It's not like in terms of male, female in like today's kind of world. It's not like I'm some raging misogynist. But it's just really interesting because in the book they go through like all these fucking characters from, they talk about like Crocodile Dundee, they talk about like Homer and the Odyssey, like all these kind of basic plots in the stories. So you've got like Rags to Riches, The Quest, but one chapter is about this balance, and they talk about kind of everyone, male and female, has like, so females have like a dark male side in stories. This is need to caveat this massively. Because
I'm seeing my face. He's like, a second, she's going to be defensive.
And males have kind of a light venom side. And in stories, that is the kind of the happy ending is the resolution of those things. I'd love to know like what is more of your sort of, and this is again, I'm not trying to be politically correct here, but like, what is more of your sort of feminine side and what's more of your male side? And because in terms of these energies colliding, I think it's quite an interesting place to play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily believe in like female and male energies as much. I think like I've actually always had quite a male energy. Probably.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Which
I agree with you in that. I think categorizing it's kind of myopic. Like it can flow.
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's definitely. I think like it's such a tricky one. I don't even know if I can separate male and female energy, because I think like I know men that are much more empathetic than me, but I know men that are much less empathetic than me, and I think you are a very empathetic person as well. But I definitely am also. So like. Yeah.
I mean, I think like maybe like a sort of stereotypical character that I have, maybe that would be like more associated with women. Like as Imme says, like I have like a real like love and attention for like detail.
Yeah.
Which obviously so many men can as well, but like that would probably be like my.
Yeah, that's so. Because it's just because one of the things I wanted to kind of I'm pulling out is this word unusual, and I think a lot of it is this juxtaposition right from the beginning, the artisan and the hedonist. And I'm trying to like, kind of tease these out because, as you say, you get this unusual brand, this unusual product, but kind of pulling out these things. And I think the attention to detail is really interesting. Is there like where did that kind of come from? That I was listening to a podcast last night about this. One of the questions they ask. Like these big tech firms ask this question, and they're basically saying that in interviews, people can. An interview's a load of bollocks, really, isn't it? Well, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it is kind of a load of bollocks. It's just like people talking about their resume or CV. Yeah. And he says one of the questions they're looking for when they hire people is high agency people. So people who basically, in our terminology, get shit done, or like ruthlessly resourceful is what they're talking about. And one of the questions all these tech firms ask, and why C Combinator use it, is what were some of the weird things you did that most people didn't do as a kid? Because the reason that shows, it kind of plays to your attention, Imme, is if you're willing to, when you're older, it's much easier to go against the grain because you're older, you're more mature. But when you're a kid, to do weird things is kind of, you're the weird kid in school. No one wants to be the weird kid in school. So I'd love to know, like, what were some of the weird attention to detail things for you, mate, you did when you were younger, when you were a teenager specifically, that have then...
I would love to know this too.
Well, because then you're pushing it, because what I'm trying to get, a lot of what you're doing is you're looking at this and you're pushing against it, well, no matter how you're doing it. So I'd love to know, what were some of weird things. I mean, for myself, I tried like all sorts of fucking random shit, like a kind of obsessive, compulsive, hugely addictive personality. So I just if I like something, I'm going all in, and but it would cause me to do, like, 1 minute it was wakeboarding. Like, I got weirdly obsessed with wakeboarding. Then I wanted to set up a peanut butter cup business as a side hustle to money life, which was tragic. I was basically getting Freddos from fucking Costco and sticking them in these peanut. But it was.
I love peanut butter cups.
Yeah, but they were. I mean, it was. I remember not selling one at this village fair. I basically had all these mum's laundry baskets full of fucking peanut butter cups. I hadn't sold one.
And good thing to have lying around.
I was driving back and I was just kind of just driving, just like, oh, fuck this, and just got high on my own supply and ate about 5 of them. But yeah, I'd love to know what are the weird foibles, specifically with you, Sam, with the attention to detail, from when you're a teenager.
God, it's a hard one I have to sort of think about that. But I mean, I would always just be like obsessed with like, the same thing. Like, it would be
the same thing.
I would just always be obsessed with. It could be like I loved like art and sculpture, so I'd either be in like the art studio just doing that. I'd do that for months, or I'd be obsessively into like a new game or sport or something. But like it was kind of like all or nothing.
Going deep.
Yeah, and
what sort of art sculptures were you doing?
They're pretty dodgy. I can show you some pictures. They were always like some quite abstract, like. What I was quite into sort of cubist and like.
What's cubist like?
Cubism's that like very abstract expressionist movement with loads of sort of distorted faces with sort of
sick.
Like,
yeah
straight edges, and it was sort of like incredible.
Yeah.
And I mean, I never recreated anything worth doing, but my mum's got them all. Mum's got them all at home.
That's so interesting, because there's the podcast that came out yesterday actually was with a guy called Will Storr, who wrote the book The Science of Storytelling, The Status Game, and Selfie, How the West Became Self-Obsessed. Fucking interesting guy. And he talks about this thing called the blandemic. So he co-wrote a book with the guy who designed Cold Drop Yard. And he talks about this blandemic thing. He says the blandemic, so bland emic, is
see what they've done there.
Is rife in brands. And again, as say you looking at the category, there's a tension there by pushing away. It's rife, he says, in 3-star Michelin restaurants, because chefs are not trying to create food that the consumer, and we'll get onto the consumer piece in a second, consumer actually likes. They are creating food to impress other chefs, to gain status from other chefs.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with architecture. So he's the guy who designed the New London bus.
Right. Oh wow.
Like not like today new, but like a few years ago.
Not the bendy one.
Like the ones that are a bit like that.
Yeah, they're very
thing
nice
at the back. Yeah, he designed that.
Yeah.
Fucking interesting guy. But he's this guy, because he's pushed against the grain. All the architects was all this minimalism in architecture, and he was kind of ostracized from that, because he wasn't confining with the way you should.
The norm, yeah.
And like these chefs, as you try and not cook a thing with, I don't know all the rages at the minute, but what, a couple of years ago it was fucking sous videing shit. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
That would gain status from the chefs world, but the actual consumer doesn't give a fuck whether it's sous vide or not. They want a nice piece of duck. And that's why I think it's interesting with this cubism shit. Like it sounds like a really interesting push against.
I mean, you're definitely right about the sort of like the chefs trying to impress other chefs. Like anytime I was ever like making drinks, it would be to sort of make something impressive, not necessarily something tasty, which is like something a bit weirder, a bit like what is that? Like, what is that weird flavour? Just got like, I mean, I actually started my like life in hospitality as a sort of training chef, and I think that was probably like where my sort of attention for detail came from.
Whereabouts were you? Is it called chefing? They want me to say it.
Well, I mean, I think that's probably a very generous way to sort of start my. I was like, just like training in kitchens. And actually,
which kitchens?
Well, the first one was for actually the first and only proper kitchen was in like a nightclub in the West End.
Oh, sick.
And day one, no idea what I was doing, just sort of thrown in the deep end, and it was like, I mean, it was intense, but like I loved it, and having like, I actually ended up in that kitchen because I sort of tried out, I mean, every single job under the sun to sort of try and find the one that sort of felt right for me, and I mean, I did everything from sort of trying out in the city to property to trade shows to everything. And I finally went to hospitality and just day one loved it. And
what was it you loved about it specifically?
I think it's that like, it's very like, like you have a very sort of clear goal at the beginning of the day, which is like, well, in the kitchen, it's like, get the food ready, people are coming, make some happy customers. And it's very like sort of conclusive.
Yeah.
And I also loved like the same is true for our events as well. Like I loved it because it was like, there was a brief and it was, once you wrapped up an event, you never have to think about it again. It's sort of done. And in the kitchens, I just loved that sort of, you might spend 3 hours picking spinach, or you might do julienning carrots or whatever it might be. And like, I just loved that like repetition, just like every time it's like getting better at it and like quicker. And it was. There's
a because you guys were in Paul Ainsworth restaurant, weren't you? In number 6.
Yeah.
There's a video which I just think sums up craft, like the obsession with craft. And I try and apply it to my kind of addiction is writing. I love writing, but constantly just trying to fucking same thing, but get better and better. Yeah. Video of Paul Ainsworth with scallops, and he's just going like that. And he like literally does like 25 in a minute, whereas it's like I mean I've never fondled a scallop, if that's the right way of saying things, but yeah, I can't say I have, but that it could probably take a normal person 10, 15, 20 minutes to get fucking scallop out and keep it all intact. Whereas he's just like a machine gun.
Yeah.
And I think there's something about that kind of that's the artisanal part of this equation, which is that maniacal obsession with getting things better and better and better and better.
Definitely.
So interesting. And then Imme, what were your kind of how did you push against the grain as a kid? Well, in those teenage years, or did you
No, I was quite naughty, but I think my childhood was quite unusual in some ways because I was one of 6 kids.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Obviously the middle child. Everyone's like, obviously. Anyway, I'm one of 4, 6. Sorry, so I've got 3 older sisters, 2 little brothers. And then my parents were German and Danish, but we grew up in actually Tokyo till I was like 3, and then we moved to London.
Tokyo? Can you remember much of Tokyo?
A little bit, but like really like I remember like earthquake drills and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Had a bit of an identity crisis when I arrived from there, and obviously was sort of white-haired and blue-eyed. But anyway, my parents were German and Danish, and we spoke Danish at home, and we ate German food, and they sort of never really integrated that much, I think, into sort of British society, if you like.
Whereabouts in Britain? Were you living in London?
We live in London, yeah. And so it was a sort of very weird world where it was like Captain Fantastic almost. Like that film where like he sort of lives with his family in the forest, and sort of so we'd be at home, we'd speak Danish, we'd eat German food, and then we'd go to school in London. And so there was a lot of identity things going on. That's the first thing. And second of all, I think when you're one of 6, you basically have to do things really quickly to get like heard. You've got to eat quickly to eat. You also, I think I've always jumped around a lot more. So if when I listen to Sam being like, I would go really deep on stuff, I was probably the opposite, where I would, pick up an instrument and then get bored of it really quickly. And then
I had the same thing.
Yeah, and just do like 7 or 8 of them, but like for like 6 months.
I was like to my dad, I was like, what School of Rock? I was like 30, I was like, I need a fucking guitar, mate. And he was like, so he took me to the shop. I was like, mate, I'm to my mate, I was like, getting a fucking bass guitar, son. And I literally got it, played it for one day, realized, that song like ding, 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 that fucking song everyone can play on the guitar, and then fucked it off after a day. But yeah, it's
exactly that. And I guess like weirdly going back to a bit of a tangent, but going back to your question around kind of gender, one thing that I always think is quite interesting was that I had short hair until I was 14 years old. I was
short as in
really short. Like I had like a side parting like curtain, and I was a real tomboy. And to the point where I'd be thrown out of girls' loos whenever I went for a wee in like restaurants or like places. I'd always like have to sneak in as if I was, because I was scared of getting in trouble. And is that only like weirdly now that I've got twins that are a boy and girl that are just turned 4. And weirdly, it was only when I had them and I saw the way that people treated a boy and a girl, like kid, when I was walking down the street with them, that I realized that so much of my childhood was probably shaped by the fact that people thought I was a boy. And at that time, which was, 35 years ago to 25 years ago, it meant that I wasn't gendered in a way that a lot of people were. And I really took that on in my parenting, because when I had a boy and girl and they were babies, I saw the way that everyone would treat my son like, hey, you big lad, you're going to play, do you know, like play rugby when you're older or football? And then to my daughter, they'd be like, hey, you fragile butterfly, like, oh, like don't drop her, you know? And I just thought, God, like it's so interesting seeing it side by side and realizing the impact that how people treat you, like when you're growing up, impacts like how you grow up and what you grow up to be.
Yeah.
So then I started really messing with people. So now my daughter had short, I cut her hair short, and my son, I put him in dresses. And to this day, like she still has short hair. He still loves wearing dresses as 4. And it's sort of the way that they then experienced the world was so different. Like people were suddenly treating her like she was a mischievous little monkey and she could do whatever she wanted. And suddenly people were treating him with this like real softness that he never experienced when he was just sort of a bald, burly lad, you know. And obviously now they're older and they can do and wear what they want. But it's funny how I thought back to when I had short hair and how actually there was something quite freeing in being a young girl, 30 years ago, where people didn't think I was a girl.
Yeah, that's so wild. I hadn't even thought of it. And as I said, like, it's a massive kind of preface on this. It's not like I'm not linchpinning onto like male gender kind of stereotypes. It's just using it as a place to explore.
No, I know.
Yeah, but I think it's really interesting what you're saying about having. Well, a couple of things is the Danish and German and Tokyo link up is super interesting.
Yeah.
And then the short hair thing is, as growing up, is and one of 6 is crazy. So. How do you think that those kind of lessons with you kind of, because I think obviously you've got parent your kids, right? There's also like a parent and leadership in your brand. Like how's that spilled into the way you do things? We've talked about kind of the weird artisanal and hedonistic liquid brand. I'd love to kind of link this even further into kind of how you're trying to lead the team. Like how do you do that weirdly, if that makes sense, or unusually? I think is kind of one of the words we've said a lot.
I mean, I think how we lead weirdly. I mean, I think like one of the things that has been very at the forefront of my mind, I don't know if it's a weird thing, but I do think we try to do things like really differently. So I think we always ask like, what's everyone else doing? And how can we like surprise people by doing it the opposite, right? So
Sorry, say that again.
So as in we'll ask like, what's everyone else doing? And how can you do it the opposite way? And is there an opportunity in doing it like the opposite?
Yeah.
And I think that's like a really good question to always ask yourself. So on a really simple level, we never just wanted to do samplings. We were like, okay, everyone else just has a tray in a supermarket and we'll get someone to taste something. Like, how can we like actually make it an entertainment experience? And then that's why the kind of piano was kind of created. So I think it's about sort of always kind of questioning, what is expected from us as a category, and then what are other categories doing, and what can we almost borrow from the codes of those categories and bring into a category that doesn't normally do them. Hence, like hedonism, hence pleasure, hence, sing along, like the stuff that you would normally do when you're out really shit-faced with your mates. Like, why can't a non-alcoholic brand do that? And at the London Craft Beer Festival, when we did the massive sing-along and the whole of the London Craft Beer Festival started singing along, that was because we were borrowing the codes effectively of a normal, very boozy brand or environment, and actually being like, there's a role for a non-alcoholic drinks brand in this space, even though it's not where you'd normally put it.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what I mean by always trying to do the opposite and think, can you actually do it that way?
Yes. Yeah. The opposite of a good idea is a good idea. It's
right.
Sutherland. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, the opposite of a good idea is a good idea. The and so in terms of the Danish and the German, because I don't know much, I've never been to like Denmark, but like I think they do. There's a feel about those kind of brands, and I just in my head I kind of conjure up this image of kind of soft wood and all those sort of vibes. Maybe it's because I've read Norwegian Wood, but that book. but yeah, how's that influenced the way you kind of view things? So I think it's really interesting, this unique kind of childhood and outsider look as being created, this Botivo thing further down the line. But like, how's that influenced things?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I almost feel like your aesthetic's more Scandinavian than mine.
Yeah, I love when you almost like never seen me like a logo, so that's sort of normal.
But why do you think? Yeah, why do Scandies have such a unique Like, what would you say the Scandinavian aesthetic is? Like, I've got it in my head.
It's definitely like very neutral colours, very low key, very relaxed, very simple.
Is it like Japan a bit?
No. It's very, very different. It's like, I mean, Japan's actually quite opulent, and like there's lots of stimulation and there's lots of stuff. Well, I think I actually just came back from spending three weeks working from Denmark, and we were in the middle of nowhere. And I remember bumping into this old lady on the beach who was like 80. And my partner was like, well, what do you guys do around here? You know, everyone comes to these like lake houses, and what's there to do? What should we do with the kids? And she just goes, well, the whole point is you're not supposed to do anything. You know, she was like, that's the whole point, is that you come here and there isn't stuff to do, and that allows you to reconnect with the world and with each other and with nature. And I think that kind of sums up for me a lot of the sort of Scandinavian way, which is, you know, that reflects in furniture, that reflects in food. Like it's a very like no fuss, simple. If you really simplify it, then you can enjoy it more.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yes, the Scandinavian furniture is so stupid, but like I'm thinking of IKEA for some fucking reason.
I mean, it's simple.
Yeah. Does what it says. Do it your fucking self. What like, in terms of the Scandinavian food, like what's that like? Yeah,
it's lots of like meatballs and lots of sort of meatballs and potatoes and lots of pickled fish.
Yes.
Like sort of mackerel.
Because Noma's where's that? Like
Copenhagen.
Copenhagen, yeah. Because that's what this Wool store guy was saying, is that he went to Noma and he basically slammed Noma, saying that it was everything just tasted of pipettes of vinegar.
Yeah.
And that was how he kind of ended up in the.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, I do. Yeah, pickle stuff is it's pretty delicious.
And I'd love to know so in terms of the leadership point of like doing things differently, and I think this tension, the opposite of a good idea is a good idea, is a principle I love. It's just like links to your tensions, links to Alex's point of disagreement. How do you get people in the team to kind of, because I totally get from a leadership perspective, it's much easier, like, this is how we want things to be done around here, but actually getting people to kind of galvanize into that way of thinking is much easier said. You can't put that on a piece of paper like you did originally. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
I mean, I think, like, to be honest, I think we haven't actually done that. What we have done is everyone who works at Botivo is equally obsessed with it, which sounds really weird, as in people, like, everyone drinks like a bottle a weekend. You know, it is a brand that I think everyone really identifies with on a liquid level, but also a brand level. If you see over there's like that whole brand world. There's another really conscious part of it when we created the world, which started off with, when I look around at, I guess, in particular, the non-alcoholic space, actually.
What is it? It's just a dumb question. What is a brand world? Because a lot of people...
Okay, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. So we've created 21 characters. So if you look at that over there on the wall, there is actually...
Probably on the camera, fingers crossed.
Yeah. But if you look at our label even, our label has, I think, 9 characters or something. But actually, that's only 9 of 21 that we've created. And the whole idea was you're supposed to be able to look at that world and be like, I want to be there, and like this represents like the personality, the vibe of like Botivo.
Who are some of those characters?
Well, so this...
You got names for them, or is it not that?
We do have names for all of them.
Oh, that's a joke.
Actually, everyone who works in the company has had one named after them, apart from Sam, myself. And I think Michael not yet.
Can I have butchers?
No, not butchers. But they're actually a lot of my mates as well, and Sam's mates. One of them is Sam's dad.
But this is the genius of it. It's like, this reminds me of, you know how you do this, what we're talking about Willie's Pies about. It's how you do one thing, it's how you do everything. So it's all the little things that actually, that's where this here is culture and leadership. And I think it almost reminds me of, you know, when Steve Jobs wanted the inside of the iPhone to be a certain colour. And people are like, mate, it's the inside of the fucking phone. Like, who cares? No one's going to see it. It's like, you need to make it this way.
Yeah.
Because the point of that is to show that that's how the leadership, and I think the characters, like, no, I never thought of that. I just thought that's a sick design. But the fact those characters is like, it shows the minutiae of your detail and like bringing it alive.
So I worked with there's an amazing illustrator called Roz Bakova. Roz Bakova, who's actually also a friend of mine, but she has got lots of different styles. But one of her styles is these amazing banquet scenes. And when you see the banquet scenes, you just basically want to be there partying with them. So she was the obvious, when we did the brand strategy, she was the obvious person to go to. But interestingly, just going back to the kind of company culture and sort of where that all started, is like I feel still like the world of drinks, non-alcoholic drinks in particular, like still talks from a brand point of view very much in sort of white hetero way.
What do you mean by that?
So that everywhere, it just everyone, all the representation, the way that it speaks, the language that's used still feels like very white and very hetero still in that world. It hasn't, so it's not reflective of like London sort of life in many ways. And I'm talking about the brand, not like necessarily just the team. It's something that was really on sort of my mind when I saw a lot of the images when I was doing a lot of like competitor deep dives. And I guess I was like, I feel like, this isn't going to talk to everybody. And I feel like this needs to be...
Sorry, as in your competitors weren't speaking to everyone?
Yeah, I feel like actually they could work harder to actually sort of have different representations within the brand itself. And actually, when we did the characters...
Anyone you were looking at specifically, or...?
I think it's just, to be honest, I think
it's
just a general, like if you look at the sort of the language and the imagery and the photography used, it still feels very much like that world. And anyway, so when we built the characters, actually the brief was we want to have different sexes, different ages, different races, different sizes, different genders, etc. So if you look at our characters, there's 21, there's the representations of every single person. And the idea is that everyone should be able to look at it and be like, that person's like me, or someone that I know is like that person. And so the kind of wider world is like really sort of kooky and sort of mad, but also has all these different kind of representations in it that hopefully people can relate to. And that kind of, again, is quite reflective of what we as a brand want. The idea behind Botivo is not to create division. Like, this is a non-alcoholic drink, this is an alcoholic drink. You can drink Botivo with booze. Like, like 1 in 4 of our customers drink it with alcohol, right?
Yeah, I can imagine it being unreal. With
It's
a little tipple of, I don't know what with it, but...
I mean, anything.
Anything. But I guess the point is that the drink...
I had it with Lucky Saint. You remember I told you at Street Market? That was unreal. That was actually fucking delicious. I don't know if that's still on there, but it was unreal.
I guess the dream is that, the dream isn't that, Botivo is just an alcoholic drink on a dinner table. The dream is that it's on the table, everyone's drinking it. Some people are popping it in a Negroni. Some people are drinking it in our signature with soda. Some people are putting a bit in their tequila soda. But no one cares because everyone is united around this brand that, they feel proud to drink. And so all that division that you normally see in the category isn't there.
I am absolutely over the bloody moon that Big Fish, yes, Big Fish, the big dons of Challenger Food and Drink brand design. I mean, Perry is an absolute legend. He's designed every Challenger brand in your cupboard. Charlie Bigham's, Goo, Tyrrell's, Rana, Clipper Tea. The list is endless. And Big Fish are looking to speak to the next wave of Challenger Food and Drink brands who are a force for good. They're looking to invest in brands, and we've got this sick thing coming next year that you do not want to miss out on. If you want to speak to Big Fish, if you want to go to the Fish Bowl, drop me a DM and I can make it happen. North Star, get listed, say listed, and grow. Do you actually know your shopper? If you don't know your shopper, you're literally pissing and spunking money up the wall. Knowing your shopper is the secret weapon to unlock more grocery listings and more stores. But not knowing your shopper is literally like driving in the dark, hungover, without a sat-nav, in a thunderstorm, in February with 5 miles of petrol in the tank. But knowing your shopper is like having a sat-nav. A full tank of petrol is a glorious sunny day. You're listening to the Sugar Babes and you've got a fresh, hot, pumpkin spice latte by your side. North Star Illuminator is the shopper map to the promised land of growth and success. It does 3 wonderful things for your brand. 1, make your marketing budget sweat. When you've got lucid, crystal clarity on exactly where each precious penny is going, you know how to drive loyalty with existing customers or even bring new shoppers into your brand. Numero 2, what's actually driving performance? Do you actually know why your sales are going up and down? You need to know, are you bringing new shoppers into the category? Is that driving growth? Are loyal customers buying more of your brand? Are shoppers switching in and out of your brand versus other brands? I mean, Perfect Head's a glorious example. They are bringing new shoppers into sports and energy. They are so incremental versus, say, chocolate bars, where people just switch in and out of brands all the time. The more you know this, the more oomph you've got with your buyer when you go to do a marketing plan, a joint business plan with retailers. The buyers want to know how incremental you are to the category. That is your passport to success. North Star is your passport. And what you can do is you can literally see it by channel, by retailer, get so specific. If you're looking to go to the next level, honestly, get in touch with North Star and go to the promised land. MKJ Ignite are a team of experienced recruiters who specialize in the challenger brand space. They recruit for over 50 brands ranging from pre-revenue startups right through to some award-winning brands such as Real Superfoods and Purdy and Fig. They recruit across all levels and all functions. So whether you're looking for a new salesperson, a new marketing whiz, or an ops guru, MKJ Ignite have got you covered. They're bloody good at what they do, trust me. So if you're looking to hire or you're looking for a new role, get in touch with MKJ Ignite. They won't let you down. Are you looking to turbocharge your brand, take it to another level, save money, save energy, save stress, save time? Well, I've got the perfect thing for you. I am delighted to announce that HC Brands, formerly HC Consulting, my boy Harry Clark, has just launched a commercial growth accelerator program designed specifically for challenger food and drink brands. You can upskill your commercial team. They've got so many modules, you can handpick them, we can do the full shebang. You're gonna save hours of research, you're gonna get the tools to turbocharge your growth, get better clarity on your brand's objectives and directions. And look, Harry's worked with some amazing brands, Holy Moly, Islands, Savile, and Rooted Drinks. He's really helped me with a strategy for Hungary. Yeah, if you're looking to turbocharge your brand, link in the show notes, and you're gonna be able to do that easy peasy, lemon squeezy. What have been the, obstacles with that? Because I think it's really interesting. It takes consumers and a flight of imagination. I think you're picking the harder route, which is very admirable, to say we're an alcohol-free brand, but we're not, and we're not going to position ourselves like this. Mark was saying this morning about LA Brewery, the kombucha brand.
Yeah.
He was saying that we don't want to... Fucking banging, yeah.
So good.
We don't want to be a kombucha brand because we're trying to kind of tap into the... alternative wine occasion. That's kind of, I don't know if you've seen it, they've got it in the champagne bottles. It's unreal.
Yeah, yes. Honestly, that's my favourite non-alcoholic.
Oh, she's drink. Do you know Louise?
I've only spoken to her on LinkedIn, but that drink with the rhubarb one, it's so delicious.
Yeah, she's amazing. I've got a lot of time for her. She's actually around this way, actually. But but what he was saying is we know it's the right path to take, because it's like, we don't want to be thought of as kombucha, we want to be thought as a sparkling wine alternative. Yeah. A bit like you plonking that down on the table and saying, look, it's party time, even though it's not we're not boozing. What have been the challenges of again, pushing against that tension, where, whether it's speaking to a buyer, because Mark was saying, you speak to a buyer and go, look, well, we're not kombucha, we're an alcohol-free wine alternative. And then the buyer goes, well, I'm not that buyer, go and speak. They're taking the harder route, it comes with obstacles. Yeah. That's why it is the harder route.
I mean, I think my answer will probably be different from Sam's. So if I because yours is more from a drinks point of view, but yeah, I think there's been a few kind of key things. I think first of all, there's an immediate knee jerk. I think when we just closed the sort of big investment round, and there's sometimes an immediate knee jerk from people being like, oh, but what are you? Like, if you try to be everything, you're nothing. And I'm very, very aware with my brand hat on that is not what we want to be. So our strategy is always to be a non-alcoholic drink for the first, the second, the third touch. And then what
do you mean? But sorry, the first.
So if you go to our website, it's all like we're a non-alcoholic aperitif. If you go to our Instagram, it is. But once someone's bought into our product, yeah, they'll get a newsletter on the third touch, which says, by the way, have you tried this in booze? Yes. And so people are already... Sorry, in booze.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking, fuck me.
No, as in, have you put
sun cream and ant repellent and then back a bottle of the Botivo?
So as in, we don't want to confuse people by immediately bombarding them with loads of messages. The idea is they buy into it, they drink it as an alcoholic drink, and then they discover, once they've really bought into how delicious and powerful it is as a liquid, that they can also use it in booze, and that's how we get around it. We'll
that's also true for our restaurants as well.
Exactly.
We always go in as a Botivo soda, and then just slowly introduce them to some of our alcoholic serves.
Yes,
and exactly. It's incredible. When some of these restaurants are putting together really delicious, complex alcoholic drinks with Botivo.
Yeah,
and the rate of sales better.
Well, I think
it's amazing.
I think to Sam's point around rate of sale, I think the elephant in the room always with non-alcoholic drinks is that the rate of sale will always be lower than it is for alcoholic counterparts, right? So I think when we were raising investment, one of the big challenges was, it's still only 2% of the whole market is non-alcoholic. Yes, there's lots of sort of hype around how non-alcoholic is growing, but the rate of sale is still much slower. And I think what interests people and what we really believe about Botivo is that it can be drunk in all these different ways. It's relevant in all these different occasions. And I pop it in a tequila soda whenever, every weekend, because it's so delicious.
Yeah.
And I think
it's just like, I don't know if it's the umami. I'm not some sort of flavour Donny here, but like it's like, is that a umami where it's like that kind of?
I don't know what it is.
What is it?
What makes it so delicious, Sam?
I don't know. I was saying like.
And also, how did you in your head? Like you talked about this kind of culturism. What's it called? Sculpturing. Sculpturing. Like, how did you sculpture the pairings for this drink in your head? Like,
So I mean, I think in cooking, like chefs are generally like pairing like what is it? Sort of salt with like fat and acid. And whereas like in drinks, like you're generally sort of balancing like sweet with acidity and bitterness.
Yeah.
So, and like your bitterness can come from anything. Like in drink making, it could be Angostura or any other sort of cocktail bitters. It could be an aperitif or an amaro. The sweetness can come from anything from honey to sugar to like jam, like whatever you want, like a liqueur. And the acidity can be anything from citrus to any other kind of acid or vinegar. So there was like that sort of base existed anyway. And I guess like thinking about the flavor, like I always wanted it to be like an aperitif inspired drink. And I mean, it was just playing around with anything. I think that I kind of decided on it being vinegar and honey, just because of the sort of like self-preserving qualities.
How do you get all the delicious? Because like when I drink Botivo, it's like there's so many different parts of the taste experience.
Yeah.
Like, how did you?
That was just like trial and error. Like my wife and I just had hundreds of jars in our home for months. We had some at different temperatures. We had some. They were like littered everywhere. Our place like stank of like vinegar and botanicals. It was horrible.
When you got this brief, kind of just trying to work this back. So you got this brief saying we want this kind of unique drink that's not boozy.
Yeah.
What were the other not like brand names, but what were some of the other concoctions on the cutting room floor like that didn't make it?
Well, or
was it always the vinegar honey?
It was. Because I wanted that sort of having to make something every time is sort of time consuming, and like I knew like it would have some kind of shelf life, but I didn't know how much. But for that particular brief, it was always going to be vinegar and honey. It could have been like a fermented version. Like when I was sort of trying it out, we tried fermenting it. We tried using distillates, and the best taste by far was just
and also flavorings, right? Because like you kind of decide.
Yeah,
the whole kind of tasting. You tried it out and realised that you just can't get that with flavorings.
I paid an annoying amount of money to various consultants to sort of, I was like, look, I've made this drink, like I want to manufacture it. My background's not manufacturing. How do I do this? And every single person was like, flavorings. And I was like, no. Like
that's you pushing against the tension again, isn't it? Yeah.
There's no way. I actually did end up buying myself a micro pipette and some scales that measured down to sort of 0.001 of a gram, and thought, look, I'll take their advice. Obviously, there's obviously a reason why everyone's saying this, and just did, and just sort of started layering flavors on top of our base, and it was fine, but you would never get that sort of flavor journey that you do with real ingredients. And once I sort of made that decision, I then had to figure out where to do it, how to do it, and
we do bang on about like no flavorings and that side of it and the craft a lot, and I think people don't understand how different that makes the taste experience. So I always wang on about that kind of metaphor of you buy chicken stock in the supermarket and it's delicious and it's fine, but if you make it overnight with herbs in it and it sits in your slow cooker, like that taste experience of that chicken stock is going to be a completely different taste experience. And that's the way that I think about Botivo when I try to explain it to people is, Sam tried it with flavorings, but that's the chicken stock in the supermarket with a homemade stuff.
I also think doing the hard is an unfair advantage, because if you pick something that's really hard, it automatically means when 10 other people try it, 9 of them will fuck it off because it's hard. So I think there's definitely something in picking the harder route in everything. I want to talk about Ollie Lloyd. He's an investor, isn't he? Yeah. Making sure that's still
Yeah,
like gave me the look of like, oh, he's fucking done a runner or something.
Well, no, he lives literally
Okay, sorry,
down here. So I was like, how did you see him on the way?
Yeah, no. So he's been on this podcast and he's great.
He's a legend.
Legend.
We love him. So supportive.
Where did we go? We went to that. Well, we went for lunch at that Paradise restaurant. You know, in Soho, Paradise, because his wife's Sri Lankan.
Yeah.
Food was
It's
fucking
incredible.
banging. Unreal.
Yeah, their
unreal.
drinks are great too.
Yeah, he's been so helpful.
But one thing he talked about in the podcast, because he's super interesting guy. So he's got all the brand stuff, obviously, but he talks about his obsession with art and the history of art. I don't know if he's ever talked to you about this, but he did a history of art degree, I think, where he went really deep into art. And I was like, what's the advantage of having... And he loves painting. And I was like, what's the advantage of painting and having that kind of going to art galleries? Like, how does that give you an advantage when you go and try and sell something at a bar or a supermarket shelf? And he talked about having this eye, just this kind of lucid kind of laser eye to just spot things. And when I'm looking at this, the illustration and the art on the bottle, and we're going to get into that, but he has this thing called the knock test, and he said he learned it at Unilever, and it's like when a brand knocks on the door, like what's the thing what's it gonna say? And I'd love to know, like, you've got this kind of bacchanalia kind of fun thing going on the bottle, like a party kind of vibe. What if we were to kind of bring that alive? Like, what would be the Botivo like perfect party if you were to kind of parachute consumer in there? Like, where is it? What does it look like? What are the smells? What are the colours like?
I mean, when we talk about the brand sort of vibe and that kind of world, it's very theatrical. I think that's kind of one of the things that we really wanted to kind of convey, hence kind of the style of it, and hence like the big yellow piano and sampling, hence whatever we do, the language we use. So we obviously we have things like the yellow. We use a lot of language of like setting the stage or the next act is like going for the next act with Botivo. And
where did that come from? Like that theatrical?
Well, it was all about developing a tone of voice that feels really in line with it. So you'll notice that, like, for example, recently we've changed it from, it was slow sipping botanicals when the rebrand first kicked in, which was a year and a half ago. And that was on purpose because Sam and myself didn't want to kind of pigeonhole Botivo into something. But then we realized that actually slow sipping and this kind of mad theatrical world that we created, there was a sort of disconnect. So now it's called a big sipping botanical aperitivo. And the idea is that we just really focused in on developing what that tone of voice was from a brand. And if it was this hedonistic, pleasure-seeking tone of voice, then that needed to be reflected in in everything. And so that's when we landed on this tone of voice that feels very theatrical and sort of over the top and sort of performative in many ways, and the idea is it kind of brings you on this journey and you're kind of escaping into this like delicious world of Botivo.
Yes. No, what I love is this. Well, it's just William Chase, the guy did Tyrrell's, and he sold Chase Distillery on to Diageo, and this is every conversation I have, that he basically said there's no rules to build a brand. There's obviously like blueprints and shit, but there are absolutely no rules. And that's why, even though I'm talking about the same thing to every single person I'm having, it's a completely different conversation because there's no way to do it. And obviously this whole we're talking about the kind of the lavish parties, but then this kind of thinking almost like a theatre and like thinking of like setting the stage, it all just makes, and that's like kind of this carousing event on the bottle is just so interesting. But yeah, what would be the Botivo party if you were to kind of bring that alive? And the reason I asked this, I asked Trip if Seth Godin, it's kind of a very brandy question, but it's like, if your brand was a hotel, what would it look like? And it just brings the brand alive. I'm like, if this party was an actual fucking thing that we're going to do tonight, where would it be? What country? How does it look?
Be interested to see what you've got a different one from me, because I've got
you go first.
I'm excited. I hope it's not that.
I'll go first and I'll get kicked under the table. I think for me,
Travelodge in Stoke.
Make it glamorous.
Yeah, I think it'd be I'm sort of picturing a sort of like jazz style bar, like loads of live instruments and just, people from every walks of life, sort of almost a smoky, hazy bar.
Oh yes.
I think, yeah, that's kind of like what I'm picturing.
Mate, that's really good, because that's very close to where I was going as well. But which we talk about a lot, because it is, we talk about when we do brand, when we're going to do brand events, what that would look like. And I think, again, we always talk about what we aren't compared to everyone else. And so another one that we talk about a lot is, like, we're actually quite urban in terms of the setting of Botivo. So yes, it's obviously made in Lannick Farm, but in terms of the world and like where, like, a lot of other brands in our category are all about health, or about the outdoors, or about the mountains, or about gardens. And actually, when we think about the kind of party world which Botivo set in, it's probably house parties. It's like jazz, like you said, like
you guys,
with different walks of life. It's like London. It's not the countryside. It's London.
Yes.
And so I think that is the kind of key thing for us. Hence why we wanted to have these characters that represent every walk of life, because that's what London's about for us. So it is it's made in Hertfordshire, but it's got a spirit of London to it.
Yeah. The interesting nuances, and I said there's no rules, is, again, it's just kind of links to what the book I'm reading, the seven basic plots, and it basically says it's kind of these principles of storytelling. And I've picked up on it when you said, like, we think like a theatre, and almost going into it with, like, that is the kind of setting the stage, all those little things tell that story for the consumer, so that when they end up, I suppose the kind of the culmination of this is the piano at, say, Taste of London. It is that theatrical vibe. Are you guys, like, into theatre and jazz? Like, is that, like, where did that...
You probably are a bit more than me.
Well, I mean, I don't pretend to be that cultured.
I am not into theatre. I'd go the opposite.
I do like jazz.
What are you into?
I love the theatricalness of the theatre, but my attention span is not long enough to go to a theatre. I think my partner loves it, and I sort of often leave at half time. Because
So I find it, so I can't sit there.
Yeah, I just can't sit there. Yeah. But I think we probably have similar energies in that sense. Like, but you're a bit more patient than me, so you probably do really.
I mean, I've got 2 kids. I haven't nipped out to the theatre much.
Nipped out to the theatre and get some milk on the way back.
You can't pay for a babysitter and the theatre ticket. It's like 300 quid.
But
was
that intentional in the brand play?
Yeah. As in the theatricalness it was intentional in terms of tone of voice. Like, how do we make it feel like really energetic, really big, like a kind of theatrical world that entertains people, but also that people want to be part of, they can see themselves in. Like, drinks they're an experience, right? And actually the brand needs to be an experience as well. And I always bang on about this, but I think one of the challenges with the non-alcoholic category in particular is that what makes a great brand are stories, right? And it's quite hard in a category that was born so recently and which has that kind of lack of maker stories. It's quite hard to tell authentic stories. So I think what really differentiates Botivo in my mind, and one of the reasons why I was drawn to it so much when I stumbled upon it, was that there's so many stories in it. There's Sam, who makes it on Lannick Farm. There's a place, there's a person behind it. There's a process where it takes a year to make. You can actually take people to the farm where it's made, and we can show them, and then it's got it's got a founder that is a maker, but also a founder who's a real hedonist, and there's so many stories around it, which other brands lack currently, I think, in the category, because it's so new.
Yeah, but I also think like the other end of the spectrum, which is like the ultimate sort of craft product, is like wine. Like, that's like a globally followed, loved drink, and I always think about it like, in order to like make wine, you've got to have this incredible understanding of like process and technique, from like growing your vines to like picking the grapes at the right time, pressing them, fermenting them, and then deciding on whether you want to age them in oak or stainless steel or clay. And it's such a process, and people love the nuances of wine. Like, bang on about the sort of the terroir, or how long the grapes have...
Terroir is like the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
But a nice wanky way of saying it, right?
Exactly, yes. Yeah. Wanky way. Like, wine is...
But I guess
like that. But what I'm saying is like imagine a world where wine was made with flavorings. Can you imagine people sitting around a table and discussing the different levels of oak flavoring or tannins that have been put into the drink?
I think that's kind of what I meant. Was that like what makes people care emotionally about brands, I guess is a better way of putting it, is stories or things that they can get behind, right? And I think, yes, you can drink something, but if there's not a story you can attach yourself to, whether that's how it's made or the brand world or the character in it, then people don't care about it as much.
Definitely.
They'll kind of jump between different brands and sort of be quite flippant as to what they're engaging with. Well, and I think within the non-alcoholic category, because it's often made in fragrance house or it's quite new, people don't have that emotional attachment to it. And it's the stories that creates that attachment.
The story thing's really interesting. It's like the best story wins is this really interesting book. And we believe what we want to believe, right? So this, I was talking about this the other day. So like, when you do a workout and you feel fucked and like you've got tar, like not tar in your mouth, but like, that feeling where you're just like, I've just absolutely ruined, like caned up, say 5K, like PB, right? You feel like that because, and it's okay to feel like that because the story you're telling yourself is that I've just pushed myself super, super hard. And like, I'm actually enjoying this feeling because I've pushed myself super, super hard. That feeling when like you're sweating and all that shit, if that was to happen to us right now, we'd be like, what the fuck? And it's because we haven't got the story wrapped around it.
And the context.
It's all the context and the framing and the storytelling. And I think it's really interesting with the space you're playing in, like in terms of the framing and the storytelling. And with the illustration, I was talking to this about, this is why I think it's interesting with what Ollie said, is I was obsessed with, I have to take this out, but basically I did a podcast with Yard Sale Pizza, and I had to they didn't want it going live for fucking so long. But we were talking about illustration and food and drink. Like, why is illustration so inextricably intertwined with food and drink? Like, you see, like Noble Rot, the wine restaurant, loads of illustration, Pringles, illustration. Like, I mean, there's a myriad of different brands, like food and drink, there's illustration and art is linked to that. Yeah. And I started looking into it loads. I was like, why is these two things linked together? And Stephen Pinko's he's like a evolutionary fucking guy, whatever. He talks about the cheesecake principle. Right. Basically, what the cheesecake principle is, strawberry cheesecake principle. He goes, like from an evolutionary perspective, we became adaptive to looking for food which is like bright in colours and kind of primes our taste buds. So it was berries and stuff to be like, this is going to help us survive from a really basic human level. And he basically says that illustration, art and food and music does the same thing. It's basically priming our senses to be like, this is going to be, this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This is going to help us be better. And then from a brand perspective, like the illustration is a promise. And I think that promise is like, this is going to taste delicious. This is going to taste unusual. And I think it's really interesting how brands can do that through illustration, and then the drink delivers that promise. And I just think what you guys have done with that bottle is just is that strawberry cheesecake principle. It's like that, so that like getting people I love that priming people for what's about to be, almost the antithesis to us sat here being like, oh my God, we've just done a 5K, but we haven't. It's the like, oh, this is going to be a delicious experience.
No, I like that.
What was the so with the characters? What was like? How did you come up with the 21 specifically?
So actually, there was a few characters that Roz had used in her other artwork that we were like, we love those ones and we love the vibe. And then we sat together and wanted to, as I said, like create characters that represented like, the different, like London and what it is today in 2023, which is when it was made. So, we wanted to have, an older person who was really vibrant and youthful. So in fact, two of them. So there's a character in there, which is, my favorite one is actually called Daisy. And it's an old lady who's just like living her best life. And she's sitting on a chair. It's on the main world. She's just like drinking a glass of wine and she's just like, doesn't give a shit, and she's just like living her best life. And she's not like this old lady that's normally represented in the media as grey haired and boring. She's like vibrant and hilarious, and just you can see that she's having a laugh. We've got and she's actually having a laugh with that's actually Rupert. This is named after your dad.
That actually could be my mum and dad. I mean, mine like,
so there's a guy in a wheelchair and they're both just having a massive chin wag and they're just having a laugh, and it's like trying to people are sort of presented a certain way in culture, and it was taking that and flipping it on its head. When I'm 60, I'm not going to be an old lady with a walking stick. I'm going to be that lady. So it's like, how do we start representing people as they actually are in 2023? It was like that. And we had a pregnant lady, and again, she's called Cass, who's actually named after Cass, who's my friend, who's the founder of Popcorn, and she's pregnant. But the point, and she's called like the CEO in like the brand world. And the idea is that she's this pregnant woman in the brand world, but she's a boss.
I've never seen someone like, you've basically created your own little play.
Yeah.
Like theatrical play, not in terms of this world. I've never really spoken to someone who's gone into that level of depth.
Yeah, there's so much depth.
Depth, but like, it makes sense now why you're having this kind of...
Well, we didn't want the pregnant lady to be the pregnant lady. We wanted her to be the boss of the CEO of a company, because that's not how normally pregnant people are portrayed. So that's her character.
The other thing, I think I've read somewhere on LinkedIn that you said that you do these consumer survey thingies. Well, they're not called consumer survey thingies, but because I think we were talking about how your main consumer is kind of East London, 25, 35. I think that's what you wrote. But like, how are you? That's what people perceive, or I don't know what the point was. But how do you? How are you going to get? This is your party with various characters. That's almost champagne, like Coca Pop. How this goes big. Like, how do you get this? And I know it's London centric now, but to build a household brand, it needs to be work outside London and or in different cities. Like, how are you keeping the soul of this, Bacchanalia and party? Point one. Point two is how are you using the customer surveys to kind of unlock more customer segments, and then how do you go?
Yeah, so I really believe in going out and talking to consumers and finding out who they are. And actually, what I wrote about on LinkedIn was sort of the opposite, which was people assume, I think, that our...
Oh, is that what you said? Sorry.
As in people assume that our consumer is like this 25 to like 40-year-old like London consumer. And actually, when we kind of do lots of work at kind of trying to understand who they are, those are those are the people that are drinking us out in restaurants and out in bars. That's true. But when you look at our Shopify data, it's actually like 55 plus, mostly sort of women that are drinking like Botivo in the home, which is totally not what you'd expect from the way the brand presents and the way it talks. Yeah. And for me, that's because we purposely have never done a segmentation in terms of like age, profiling, because hence, why the old person in our world isn't like a classic old person. We've framed it, we've made it all around attitudinal. It's like people who love life, people who are pleasure seekers, people who love how things are made, people who are culturally curious. And that's not an age thing, that's a mindset.
Yeah, it's the whole thing of like psychographics versus demographics.
Exactly.
So many people look at demographics. I think now more than ever, and I was thinking this the other day, you don't really see old people as much anymore. As in, like, before, like, someone hits 60 and they're like, look older, as now because of like people caring more about their health. As you said, Imme, when you're 60, you're not going to be kind of on a walking stick.
No one is.
No one is.
The way the media
portrays, it's like that older demographic is kind of neglected by challenger brands. We obsess over how do we target Gen Z on TikTok. Well, look up, mate, because the older consumer has way more money. They've got more time to spend and look at pleasurable things. But I think people look at the demographic through a demographic lens. You're like, we need to be focused on the next generation, Gen Z. Whereas 100%. If you look at it through a psychographic lens, which basically means, a 20-year-old, 6-year-old and 70-year-old, they're very similar if they're all into, like at Meatopia, for example, this weekend, the meat festival.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you'll get the whole smorgasbord of different age groups, but they're all the same psychographics, that you can actually speak the same. As I think when you look at it through a demographic lens, you start just alienating massive customers, i.e. your 55-year-old people.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I just feel like when people start being like, we are actually for a 25-year-old person who shops in this place and does this, then they're missing a trick, because I still feel like I'm 20 and I'm 40, so if someone was to put me in a box and be like, this is what a 40-year-old's like, who's a mum of two, I definitely would not be talked to, as I definitely wouldn't connect with it, right? Because that's not, I've done those segmentation pieces. When I was, on the agency side, I saw how people were put in boxes by brands, and I know for sure that I would never have related to any of them.
What is the other load of bollocks you found at agencies that you just don't think is right for challenger brands? And then point one, point two is, what do you think is actually really valuable?
I mean, I think I worked on the strategy and sort of research part of it. And I think the one, I think understanding like attitudinal elements and stuff is really, really important. And understanding how people see your brand and the impressions they get when they see it straight away. That's something you can only do through going to strangers and being like, what are you thinking of? What are your impressions? Like, where it doesn't, the bit that I sort of didn't think agency, where it doesn't work is when you're asking everyday consumers to like try and evolve a brand creatively. Like it stifles creativity. So there were so many like big brands who'd come up, when an agency would come up with an amazing ad, and they'd go and be like, go and talk to consumers about it. And you'd go and talk to them, and they'd be like, oh, I don't like the hat that guy's wearing, or like, oh, that makes me feel a bit weird. And they would like kill an amazing creative ad because an everyday consumer was like trying to tweak it with their creative knowledge. And it's like,
no, you like do mass market kind of consumer.
Yeah, and you'd be like, just leave that stuff to geniuses. Like there's a reason why creative directors and ad agencies are genius, are creating amazing content. It's because they think in a different way from Joe Bloggs.
It's the curse of
me.
averages, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that
so
for me is like the biggest thing is, just trust agencies that there are some amazing minds in those places, and don't ask people to. Yeah,
it's one of those like weird things that's both wrong and right, isn't it? It's like you need to speak to your core consumers, because if you don't want to know what you're creating. But then if you speak to too many consumers, you get the curse of average, where Joe Bloggs says, oh, I don't like that that gorgeous yellow top. But if you speak to the kind of the archetypal characters that are on this party, they're going to give you the right feedback. And I think it's one of those things that's wrong and right. If you don't speak to your consumers and you're just like, I'm doing it my way, then that's just kind of fucking stupid.
You just speak to them to understand who they are and like their immediate reactions to your brand, but you shouldn't speak to them to develop like creative for your, for it, I don't think. Because I think that magic can only come from like people who are not like me, people who actually are creative directors who have been like honing their craft for like 20 years, 10 years, 5 years.
What have been some of the really like kind of hard days for you, Sam, like in terms of just getting, well, even with the other business as well, like getting, I think there's an element of grit and kind of just, grit is the word, to get the ball moving or the snowball rolling, do you know what I mean, in those early days?
I mean, I guess like just sort of having that sort of obsession with like trying to make this work and going against the advice we were getting. And then it was like, okay, if you're going to do that, how are you going to do that? And, we ended up having to convert a milking parlour into our now unit. And like, again,
milking parlour?
Yeah, so like
like cows get milked.
Where cows get milked, yeah.
That's a joke, so we call it a milking parlour.
Yeah.
No, it's so retro, it's so old school, I love it. Milking parlour.
The milking parlour.
That's hilarious.
I mean, it was just sort of, I didn't know anything about manufacturing or like how to build a production line or anything. And it was just sort of this like relentless belief that I needed to put Botivo in a bottle and start selling it, that, meant I had to put my little like builder's hat on or like just research cap on. And like thankfully for me, I actually have a, my father-in-law he has a sort of engineering brain, and he, whether it's sort of making pastry at home or curing bacon under the stairs, like he just will figure out how to do anything. So I sort of had him as my sort of sidekick.
And what were some of the things how did he help shape the production side?
Well, I think it was just trying to work out the best production flow. I mean, I have to say, if I knew now what I needed to know then, I probably wouldn't have moved into the milking parlour. Just because
the milking parlour's got the conjures up like really romantic.
I know, I imagine like buxom ladies, with little like buckets, like
just turn the milking parlour into my production line.
It isn't that glamorous. I mean, like now that I know, like, sort of ceiling heights everything in production, and like our ceiling heights are quite low, so we've had to like buy tanks that are quite low and waste basically what could have been valuable floor space. But I mean, it is just sort of, it's just that like, I mean, in the early days it was sort of trial and error. I mean, some of the darker days some of my darker days have always been production related. Like, there are so many things that can go wrong. And like with my sort of paranoid hat on, not having any data around like shelf life, I mean, I was always thinking a bottle's just going to pop open and explode. But I was like...
What, so was that the biggest ball ache, was the shelf life?
That's
no,
but there was no ball ache because it turned out to be really long.
Well, no, exactly.
As in it's really long, but you didn't know that.
More just like in my head, I'm just sort of thinking,
yes,
I think it's going to explode. Like, and every batch, I sort of do my sort of shelf life tests and just sort of hope for the best. And then finally, we hit 6 months, and then we hit 12 months, then we hit 18 months. So it was in this 2 years.
You were like thinking, it's gonna.
No, you didn't know. It's like,
just waiting on the customer inbox. Fuck.
It's probably like it's probably like the biggest fear for anyone who works in production is like, and like if one bottle goes, every single bottle from that batch is going to go. But like the single darkest day was for sure batch 3, which was...
Take me to batch 3.
Take you to batch 3. It was it was something like making Botivo is like, especially in the early days, is like laborious. Like I mentioned, the set honey that we had to get out and put it into our tanks, and that alone was like tough. And we have to wait for. In those days, we sort of waited 6 to 8 weeks for our infusions to be ready, and everything was just so manual. And the batch happened, we blended it, it was tasting great. We brought the bottles in to sort of bottle it, and started bottling it, which again, like with some quite basic equipment, was like long. And then finally, sort of, you're looking at 8 weeks later, I put the final box in. We like sort of shift our bottles in the production room on these like sort of grey boxes with wheels, and put it in this little grey box, off to go and be packaged into a bottle. And I just saw this little bit of like amber glass on
amber glass
as in like brown Botivo.
Okay, yeah.
Glass.
Is that brown?
Well, it's like
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Amber.
Amber. Antique.
Yeah.
Amber in my milking parlour.
Yeah, just like
Imagine having
this,
like scones and tea in this milking parlour.
It's
probably rank.
Pretty savage in there. It's like there's not even a seat.
Yeah, I think the
It's
name
not made to
makes it sound super romantic.
It's quite a hostile environment. There's not even a seat.
It's very sterile in there. It's like white walls, bright lights, no seats. But yeah, I found this I sort of saw this bit of like amber glass at the bottom of this box, and like my heart just sunk, and I was like, don't be glass, and sort of prodded it, and I was like,
and how many bottles had you made?
we made 2,000 bottles.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Which was like a lot of money, and just like more than anything, it's like a lot of effort and time. Like it's sort of the whole process then was like a nightmare. And
at the time, what you was like hand waxing, hand labeling, all that stuff, right?
Everything.
So,
it was.
There was just two of you.
No,
Was someone helping you do that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I had Rupert, who was a man with many hats, and sort of stared this bit of glass for a long time, and eventually decided that we had to just throw the batch away, and then unpeel all the wax, throw it down the drain. And it was just like grit.
Ouch.
It was just a bad day.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because we kind of talked a lot about the brand hat, and I think but there's also again what is timeless. I think everyone asks what's on trend, where's it moving. It's like the reason Innocent's still going around is because the product was fucking banging. Like the founder of Innocent said, people talk about being different, and I even did a talk about saying don't do a talk being be different, don't better. Everyone waxed lyrical about we're better, probiotic, blah, blah, blah. Bollocks. But he was basically, no, you have to be right. So the product has to be better and different. The marketing has to be better and different. Everything has to be better and different. He basically says product is better, marketing is different. That's what they did at Innocent. And he actually said that everyone sees Innocent, a bit like, you've got the yellow hats on there, like Innocent did. Yeah. Is they all see us as this kind of marketing, which they did an amazing well. But he goes, why actually boil it down? It was the product. And the product is your best marketing. Your liquid is your, what is it? Liquid is your...
Delicious.
I think just that like word of mouth thing is very like.
That's
real.
That's a huge thing for us because people people always talk about 100 fans, but actually for me it's like people get obsessed with Bivo just like I am. It's not a product that people are like, oh yeah, that's all right. People either are like, I don't get it, or they're like, I fucking love this, and that is because the liquid, not because of the brand,
Yes, that's why, because it's almost this kind of, I'm just seeing this, I've got this image in my head of you in this kind of cow shed / parlour, just with that relentless kind of, almost like an Elon Musk, almost like that kind of just drive to just, no matter what happens, this is going to work. Like, talk me through those, because I think the brands that really work, you have to have this obsession to the point of kind of just insanity. It's genius and insanity are kind of two sides of the same coin. We're like, this is going to work. Like, how did you keep? And I suppose I'm asking this selfishly with the podcast, like trying to get the podcast to grow as fucking like long as fuck sometimes. And it's like, how do you just keep in that? Do you know what I mean?
It's just belief, isn't it? It's just like. Even after like blows like batch 3, it's just like doesn't matter how big stuff up. You're like, our goal's still the same, and you just keep hammering away. And I think if there's one compliment I'll give myself when it comes to like sort of finishing a task or a job, like I have stamina and like I will just keep at it. And like probably again just learned that in kitchens and then learned it at events where you would work for
get back up.
Hours and hours, and you just keep playing away because your goal is. Well, our goal is just to sort of sell more bottles and
stamina.
Sam is an absolute workhorse. I have to there's never when you have co-founders, people always say, there's one co-founder is not working as hard as the other. No doubt in my mind there's no doubt in my mind ever that Sam is working like 1,000 times what he should be working. He's just a workhorse.
There's this. I've been reading this thing by Daniel Kahneman, which is it's easier to spot other people's mistakes than it is our own. I think it's interesting. Like what mistakes you spot in other people that you actually do yourself. It's quite a deep question. That.
Whoa, what do you mean from a company or a personal level?
Perspective, company perspective, any perspective. I'm trying to think
Yeah, I see a lot of mistakes in myself. To be honest, I think my impatience is definitely one of them. I think we always it's quite easy for me to get bored of something and move on to something, and actually the kind of key thing in marketing or that whole world is even if you're sick of it, your consumer probably hasn't even heard about it yet. And so that for me is kind of this thing of we want to be really single-minded, we want to be really sticky, we want to stand for one thing, but I'm constantly sort of distracted by the shiny lights. Oh, let's do this, or let's try that, or let's. And actually, the hardest thing.
How do you do that? Because I've got the same thing right now. Because I'm potentially doing another podcast, another podcast, say about after this, and I'm just thinking, is this a distraction? I'm like, oh, there's some new shiny toys, baby. I feel like I'm a little kid at Toys R Us.
Well, to be honest, it's had to be a real conscious thing. So we actually have gone the other way, where we've gone we're just going to release one product. We're going to make it iconic. We're going to just ham home the yellow. We're going to ham home our characters. We're going to make the bottle iconic. And by being super self-aware that I am distracted easily, I've just sort of just doubled down on the fact that we're not going to get distracted by lots of different flavors or formats and things like that. We're just going to make it the lighthouse product on every menu. I want people to the lighthouse products. I want people to go into any restaurant that is of a good standard and be like, oh great, a Botivo soda, because it's consistent.
Well, that's what I did at Lura.
Yeah.
Despite it costing me an arm and a leg for a piece of blue meat.
So that's it. The idea is that it's like when you're traveling on your and when you're younger and you see a McDonald's and you're like, oh great, McDonald's.
Yes.
And
I still get that now.
Yeah, to be honest, yeah.
Here we go.
And it's that kind of feeling of we don't need to have 10 different flavors or 10 different formats. I just want it to be oh yeah, great, they've got a Botivo soda. That kind of razor sharpness is what is the only antidote to this kind of desire to do lots of things, is just to be really firm, be no, you have to just do one thing.
I think also that from my perspective, it's just sort of a lot easier, right? There's just fewer, my supply chain is simpler. It's just and we can just sort of just focus on just making that iconic and making it better. And actually, for us, where I still get that sort of creative outlet is our limited editions that we're still starting to release.
Oh yeah, what was that? I saw that Me one, wasn't it? Was it Me? Am I being
Maison Francois?
MF.
Completely different.
Yeah, you're missing one little bit at the bottom.
Was it? Yeah. But it was Me, wasn't it? On the tin, not the tin, on the drink.
MF.
Oh, MF.
Yeah. So that's it. So we basically read the logo to have the characters around the Maison Francois logo.
That's the restaurant with the yeah. Okay,
it's French. It's an amazing sort of French sort of bistro tech in St James.
Incredible.
And Sam created a completely new product, and we just did 650 bottles that are now sold out, and released them in partnership with them, and it's sold in the restaurant and then on our website. And we're doing another one in January with another big restaurant. And then we're doing
Tell me afterwards.
And the idea is that's how we can show off our innovation equity, is through those limited editions, which are just one-off, completely new products, which will be in our bottle but with redesigned labels in partnership with places we really respect. And that will be the creative outlet versus 3 different permanent flavors.
Exactly, because I think there's obviously a danger to sort of cannibalize your own product by releasing other versions of it, and it's just for us, unless it was a wildly different product for a wildly different occasion.
And did you with your trying to get into your kind of the artisanal brain is so with Maison Francois. Bonjour. With Maison Francois, I can't say it.
I like it.
Is you get that brief, or like, I'm just trying to work out how your brain works, Sam, in terms of making it, as you say, doesn't cannibalize this, has this unique limited edition innovation equity. Like, yeah, how do the cogs in your brain work to create that?
I mean, it was like, it was thank you sort of quite sort of
eating loads of snails as you were developing it.
I mean, yeah, like
snails and vinegar all over the milk parlour.
I mean, yeah, like Maison Francoise is like sort of amazing French restaurant, so like it had to have a sort of French vibe to it, and like I've always sort of followed drinks briefs, writing menus for people, so like it's something that I love doing, and like pastis was the thing that sort of popped into mind, and
pastis
is that sort of thing like Pernod, that sort of really alcoholic, really aniseedy, French liqueur. That, I mean, truth be told, I'm not a fan of, but I do love aniseed flavors, but when they're sort of slightly more pared back. So for me, I was like, pastis is such an iconic French drink. Can I try and recreate a version? And so like I had probably, again, like sort of jars, 50 botanicals sort of lined up in our unit, and just sort of started playing around with different versions. But one thing I really wanted to work into the drink, which is that sort of thing that I feel like, again, like going back to that thing where like if you give something unusual, they'll sort of talk about it, and like artichoke was a key botanical in that drink.
Artichoke, yeah.
Yeah, and again, like artichoke is such a iconically French ingredient. Like you think of a big buttery artichoke, and like, the flavor profile of artichoke is really sort of earthy, mushroomy, very bitter. When not used properly, and yeah, so then sort of like weaved in this sort of, I guess, sort of aperitif inspired pastis, which we then ended up selling, and
it's delicious.
We have
a bottle here we can give you to take home.
Guys, let's wrap that up. I've absolutely loved that. Just as I say, one of the biggest kind of lessons I've taken is there are no rules, and I think your approach is totally unique, totally unusual. The artisanal, the hedonism, the depth, and like what I love is like, I'm not in the I mean this in a positive way, like pick that up, but the depth from that bottle to all the world storytelling, the fact that the employees have a character that represents them, it's your friends, like the fact that represents the psychographic versus demographic, it's just fucking genius. And yeah, I'm excited where you're going to take this, because I think it's very big places. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.